You're listening to The Coffee Hour. I'm Andy Bates.
I'm Sarah Gulseth.
Thanks to Concordia University, Wisconsin for supporting The Coffee Hour. Find out more about Concordia University, Wisconsin at cuw.edu.
Live uncommon.
Continuing our international series today, we head to Ethiopia, and today we're talking with the Reverend Mark Rabe, serving the Lord in Ethiopia. Pastor Rabe, thanks for being our guest.
Thank you. It's a joy to be with you.
It's been a while since we've connected. What has it been? A whole year, maybe?
Just about. Yeah, maybe just a little over. Yes.
Yeah. So tell us about where you get to serve the Lord. Tell us about where you get to serve in Ethiopia.
I serve in Ethiopia, Addis Ababa, the capital city. About 5 million people live there. I work with the Ethiopian Evangelical Church, Mekane Yesus, at their seminary. It's about a 11 million member church body, and I teach at one of their 5 seminaries, their main seminary in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia.
That is, I think we forget or we don't realize how large the church body is there in Ethiopia. Can you tell us a little bit more about the Mekane Yesus church body?
Well, they continue to grow thanks to their missionary zeal. I serve at one of their 5 seminaries. They have 4 other regional seminaries scattered throughout Ethiopia. And my main task there is to teach at the master's level and also the bachelor's level pastors and teachers for their church. So it's really exciting to work with them. They have an international mission society, so they've even sent missionaries to other parts of Africa. So they have quite a missionary heart, not only for Ethiopia, but also beyond their borders.
Tell us about the students at the seminary. Who do you actually get to teach?
Many of my students at the bachelor's level, some of them may already have been pastors for many years, because in Africa, often the case is you have usually someone who has a diploma or even a certificate. They become a pastor. Sometimes they're even an evangelist and then move on and become a pastor. And then by the time they come to the seminary, they may have a few years under their belt. I teach at the bachelor's level. And then the master's level tends to be those who have been pastors for many years, or even someone the equivalent of like a district president and those kinds of levels. So it just varies. But I also have, at least over my time, I've taught students who have come from Guinea-Bissau, which is in West Africa, and they're a Portuguese-speaking country. I've also taught a number of students who have come out of Islam, converted to Christianity, and so it's really exciting to teach at these various levels, and a variety of students who have come from different parts of Africa as well, and different backgrounds coming to Christ from a Muslim culture.
Wow.
So you've really gotten to interact with students from a variety of different backgrounds, and get to know them and engage in conversation with them. Tell us about the community and the culture of the people, where not only at the seminary, but in the community where you live, and what you've been learning about that culture.
Well, a lot of, and Addis is a big city like any other big city. Many cars, very busy, smoggy, and so it's a busy city. But cultural wise, I mean, Ethiopia has over 83 different languages. So you can imagine there are many different cultures that surround those different languages. The majority language is Aromafa, which is also the majority people group. And many of the Mekane Yesus come from that background. And they live, most of them are either to the southern part of Ethiopia or to the western part of Ethiopia. And but culturally, Ethiopian culture, we just, before we left, we had Easter on May 4th, I think it was. And so, we follow the Julian calendar. So we have Easter more in line with the Eastern Church. And, we also have the Julian calendar. So we're 7 years behind the rest of the world. So whenever I'm in Ethiopia, I'm 7 years younger, which is pretty awesome. But A lot of the culture, I mean, I learned a lot of my culture experience. Initially, it was in language school, but when we sit down and have coffee with the students during either we have a break in between one of my 4-hour classes, we'll go and take coffee, and we have a chance to sit down and talk about culture and what's going on in their lives and their ministry, since there are at least a handful of my MA1 students. I have 30 that are in master's, the MA1 program, Master of Arts program, and a number of them come in from a highly Muslim context, and so to hear their challenges. Others come from a context where, as Mekane Yesus, Lutheran background, the majority might be of Orthodox background. So there's those different experiences that they share with me in the classroom, and especially during time of taking coffee, that we can talk theology and hear about their mission opportunities. But that's where I get to learn a lot of the culture is sitting down and having coffee and discussing with my students and getting to know them. I also mentioned that we just had Easter, so one of my students invited my wife and I and my colleague Eric Stinnett and his wife Johanna over for a meal after the Easter service. So, we got to have injera and tibs and different foods that the Ethiopians usually eat when they celebrate Easter, especially doro wat, which is a spicy chicken dish that's something you have on a holiday. It's like turkey in America on Thanksgiving.
Mm.
Who are some of the other people that you teach alongside with at the seminary? You mentioned some of these relationships that you've been able to build. Who are some of those other people that you've gotten to know well?
I work with Reverend Eric Stinnett. He's another LCMS missionary that we actually, both of our families deployed together and have been at Addis Ababa at the seminary for over 5 years now. We do have other mission organizations that are there, either from Sweden or Finland, Denmark. So they have some professors that are there, or they are just serving in a different capacity. We live on a missionary campus or a street within the campus, and we have Sweden and Finland and America all represented on that street. And one of my colleagues is actually working with their International Mission Society, and he serves with the Swedish Church. So we really have an international community that we get to work together in the work there in Ethiopia.
I can't believe Sarah missed the opportunity to ask this question as you were talking about culture.
Okay.
I think you mentioned coffee about 6 times.
Yes.
And this is the coffee hour. So I have to ask. I have to ask a question about the coffee, since it sounds like it's an important part of the culture there. How much is coffee a part of the culture?
It is. If you go over to someone's house, kind of like in Japan, you have a tea ceremony. In Ethiopia, a coffee ceremony is very important. So if you go over to someone's house, they will have a coffee ceremony where they will actually hand grind the coffee and then cook it in what's called a jebena, which is a special Ethiopian coffee pot over charcoal. And then you will have coffee. And of course, since there's a Christian influence in Ethiopia, you don't just have 1 or 2, but you have to have 3 cups of coffee. And each of those cups of coffee have different names. One of them is the cup of blessing, or barakah. I forget the other names, but it is a central thing. So whenever it's not, you don't take a tea break. In Kenya, you take a tea break, but in Ethiopia, you take a coffee break. And so it's a very important part of the culture. They even say that coffee was discovered in Ethiopia. So it's a big deal.
Ethiopian coffee is my favorite, at the top of my single origin list.
It's mine too. I've become almost a coffee snob after living in Ethiopia. Nothing compares to Ethiopian coffee.
I wouldn't blame you. What has the last year been like for you? I know we've checked in with you a while ago. How is the seminary and the community there? How have they kind of weathered that storm over the last year?
Well, in Ethiopia, I think we had a great bit more freedom than many of you all have. Initially, when COVID became a worldwide pandemic, it was just before Easter last year, if I remember right. And we sent the students home for Easter break, and many of them thought they were coming back, but they didn't. We continued to have the schools closed. And so some of us, like my colleague and I, we just sent them home with their final exams, and they did their courses online. And what I mean by online is they just emailed the results of their paper or their final exam when they were done. They emailed what they had written. The idea of a Zoom call or doing anything face-to-face on the internet was just not possible, because many students live 300-400 miles away from Addis. They might even have to go an hour to a local internet cafe, even just to send their results or their exam back to us. So it was a big challenge, and so we were locked. We were apart during that time. We weathered through the summertime, and then we actually started up in September, and we actually had classes face to face this whole academic year. Although the class periods were cut in half, and everybody was masked up and social distance, but we were blessed. Actually, for compared to the rest of the African field, with the exception of Kenya, we were able to have classes. We were able to continue on teaching, just at a reduced amount of time in the classroom. So it was a real blessing. We still have to wear masks in Addis Ababa whenever you go, when you're on campus or when you go outside on the streets of Addis. You still have to wear a mask. So, and I think that's still continuing to this point.
Earlier, I think you mentioned a 4-hour class. Did you mean a 4-credit-hour class, or a class that meets for 4 hours?
Yes. We have a different system in Africa. So if you do have a 4-credit-hour class, you do meet once a week for 4 hours. So I teach a 2-credit-hour class, so that would be for 2 hours, and a 4-credit-hour class that we have class for 4 hours. So that's why we have an appropriate coffee break about midway through, because I teach in the afternoon after lunch, and about 2:00 they're ready for a cup of coffee. So yeah, that's typical of because of the influence of the British model upon education. So you meet once a week, and whatever credit hours, that's the number of hours you teach.
Fascinating.
Yeah. Are there other things about the structure of education there that you've learned to embrace, or that you find unique or different from how we approach education here in the States?
I mean, there is a different style of learning. It's much more of the older model, where you would memorize. You may not have access to textbooks like we do in the United States. Sometimes we might have PDF copies, or we have 2 or 3 on hold in the library, and the students can check those out. But we have quite the luxury here in the United States, where we can have our own textbook, our own books, and so that's often a challenge is getting books. But one of the blessings that I have is some of the materials I use. Lutheran Heritage Foundation has printed like the Book of Concord or a small catechism, so I have access to those because they are over there in Ethiopia or Kenya. So that's quite a blessing to me, and a great help. But that's one of the biggest challenges in all my experience that I've had, not only in Ethiopia or in Kenya, or my colleagues as well, as actually having textbooks for their students.
We have more to learn about life serving the Lord in Ethiopia with the Reverend Mark Rabe. We'll continue this conversation in just a moment. You're listening to The Coffee Hour. I'm Andy Bates.
I'm Sarah Golseth.
You're a miracle. You know that, right? A living, breathing, one-of-a-kind miracle. You were created to stand apart, to share your gifts in the service of others, to make an uncommon impact in a common world. And at Concordia University, it's our mission to help you do that. To live uncommon. To learn more about Concordia, go to cuw.edu.
Welcome back to the Coffee Hour. I'm Andy Bates.
I'm Sarah Gulseth.
Today we're talking with the Reverend Mark Rabe, serving the Lord in Ethiopia. We've been learning about the seminary life and what you get to teach and how you get to serve the Lord in Ethiopia. Tell us more about what family life is like for you. And I know that with some of the challenges this year, not being able to get out and explore and do those types of things. But what has family life been like for the Rabe family in Ethiopia?
Well, I mean, we homeschool, so that's much of it went on the same. We also have a homeschool cooperative attached to one of the international schools, Bingham Academy. And so we were used to having sports, and my daughters and youngest son play sports. And so we weren't able to do sports this last year due to COVID. So that's like the highlight. My girls play track and also, or they run track and also play soccer, or as my youngest son says, it's football. So, you got to say it properly. It's football, not soccer. But so that was a challenge for them. My oldest daughter just started, she's just finished her 11th grade year. She was going to Bingham Academy, which is an international school. It used to be the old missionary school in Addis Ababa, but now there are many more Ethiopians as well as missionary kids. So she for her, is a bit of a challenge because they would go for half days, but they did get to go, unlike many schools here in the U.S. She did get to go for half days. They'd have to wear masks and social distance, and then in the afternoon she would come home and find out what her homework was for the classes that she couldn't do face-to-face. They had kind of a rotation model. So you would go some days with your face-to-face class and other days online. So but it was her first time actually in a school and then having COVID, but at least she got to go. So we thank God for that. I mean, otherwise, we have 5 missionary homes, and much of our life was, visiting with our other colleagues who are up and down the street. And the biggest kind of challenge was not being able to get out much, because the initial lockdown, I mean, like everybody else, you didn't go anywhere. And so that was a challenge, but we still continued with school because we homeschooled. So we were allowed or able to do those kinds of things that we would normally do. It's just the hardest thing, I think, for me and my colleague, if I were to shift thinking about it at the seminary, when suddenly you're not teaching and your main role is to serve at the seminary and teach, and you can't be in a classroom, you kind of just feel like you're sitting on your hands and you can't do what you've been called to do. But so that was a challenge for us, at least for me and my colleague, not actually, well, all my colleagues who would be in the classroom. That was a big challenge.
Sure. What is the outlook like now? Now that we're a year later, we've gotten through some things at least. What is life? Is life going back to some semblance of a normal-ish kind of thing now?
Yeah, much of it is getting back to normal. Currently, Ethiopia will have elections on the 21st of June, so we want to keep them in prayer, that country, as they have their elections. But we have our graduation is in another week at Mekane Yesus, so they will have their graduation. So that's an exciting thing, to have the culmination of the year and have graduation for all those students who have worked so hard over the years. But some new things, at least at the seminary, beginning this summer, they're going to have some expanded programs like a Master's of Theology and also some summer programs. So it's beginning to be life as usual. There's still masks and social distancing, but it's beginning to lessen much more.
How would you say the Lord is providing in the midst of all the challenges you've been facing? How are things continuing to grow and move forward?
Well, I can think, at least as missionaries, we have been very blessed by God's people throughout the pandemic and even to today, in that they have been very generous in their support, and that really has been a blessing, because everything could have just kind of stopped, but God's people continue to be generous. I know through the pandemic, I was also getting, I remember one email in particular from a school where they had sent letters of encouragement for us and for our family, and so that was a great blessing to be able to receive that and be encouraged. But God's people continue to provide and enable us to serve in the field, and because of their generosity, we're able to be their hands and their voices in the places in which God has called us to be.
What is the outlook for the students? What's on the horizon? Anything exciting to look forward to for the students that are at the seminary?
Well, for many of the students, for those who are graduating, they get to move on. They get to, some of them may have already been pastors. Some will go back to their parish and serve there in that place. And I know there are, many challenges in Ethiopia. And so for them to be further equipped theologically, to be able to apply what they've learned to their particular context, and having, whether it be 4 years or 2 years for the master's, of sitting down and being able to work out theology, and then also do it in a practical way and a deep way, then to apply that to the particular context in which they serve. I know Islam is spreading in Ethiopia. There's also the great need for reconciliation, as there are challenges between different people groups. So, I'm excited, as we just finished up an academic year, and I was able to review at least 3 master's theses, and to see, the engagement they have in theology, and the place in which they serve, and how they can better serve their people and their greater community. It's really encouraging. That's kind of the highlight as a teacher, to be able to see the ahas of the students, and how they apply it to their context.
How can we follow your story and continue to learn how the Lord is using you in Ethiopia?
Well, certainly. lcms.org/Rabe is where our giving page is. I don't have Facebook, unfortunately, because of where we're at, but I do send a regular newsletter out, and that's one of the ways in which we do send out what's going on. I think Mission Central has their website, and you can find our regular newsletter there as well. I wish I was, if I was on Facebook or those other things, but my context doesn't allow me to do that, so I can't share those things. But pray for us and keep us in your prayers.
Indeed. Thank you. We will. Our guest today, the Reverend Mark Rabe, serving the Lord in Ethiopia. Pastor Rabe, thanks so much for being our guest on the Coffee Hour.
Thank you. It's been a joy to be with you again.
You've been listening to the Coffee Hour. I'm Andy Bates.
I'm Sarah Gulseth.
The Coffee Hour with Andy and Sarah is a production of KFUO. To support the Coffee Hour and KFUO Radio, visit KFUO.org. You can also text KFUO to 41444 or send an email to gifts@KFUO.org. And you can call us at 800-844-0524. KFUO. Christ for you, anytime, anywhere.